I know, it so rarely actually works, it's surprising. Right. So, hi everybody. My name is Justin Richer, and I was just asked moments ago if I could give this talk, but this is actually from a slide deck from a talk that I gave out at the MIT Media Lab a few months ago, introducing OpenID Connect to a bunch of groups that were working with MIT, and it's been making the rounds a bit. These slides are available publicly. If you want a copy, just ping me after. John has started me in the middle of the slide deck, so give me a moment. Where do you keep your mouse? So, let's see here. Yes, that's helpful if you're just going forward and backward, but I'm not. So this is roughly an hour and a half to 2 hour talk, and I don't, how much time do I even have? 5 minutes? Oh, 10 minutes. Donna's being very generous today. All right, so let's do this. So the Venn bubble, which you haven't seen yet because that's on an earlier slide, but if you want to know the lowdown on all of these Venns, go track down Eve Mailer, who I believe is at the conference here this week, from Forrester, and she will give you a Venn education. But the idea is that we've, in one part of the bubble, you've got sort of your traditional sort of enterprise identity stack kind of things. You know everybody, all the parties ahead of time, you just don't know exactly what they might be doing. On another section, you've got your sort of API authorization, which is where OAuth really comes into play. Incidentally, SAML plays in that first bubble. In the second bubble, you've got OAuth, which really solves API delegation and access and all sorts of things like that from the authorization standpoint. And then in the third bubble, you've got OpenID 2.0, which traditionally works in the the open internet, like truly internet scale, distributed world, where you don't even necessarily know the players ahead of time. And what's happening here, what we're seeing today is a term I borrowed from Eve called the identity singularity, where those bits of the bubble are collapsing towards the middle. And I really believe that OpenID Connect is what's there in the middle of that bubble. It's bringing together the best of the worlds from OAuth, because it's built directly on top of OAuth 2, from SAML. If you're doing the sort of the most advanced modes of OpenID Connect, you can really kind of think of it as SAML with squiggly braces. It's got really all of the same moving parts and pieces, but it can also be as simple and as dynamic as OpenID 2.0. And the fact that one protocol can actually span that entire breadth is very, very exciting to me. Wrong screen. So we've already basically covered this earlier today, that OpenID is an identity protocol that's built on top of OAuth 2. And it's not just a profile of OAuth 2 or does something that's OAuth-like. It really is built directly on top of OAuth 2 as much as possible. And it's extending OAuth 2 in places where it needed to be extended, and sort of profiling and refining OAuth 2 where it needed to be in order to make an identity profile work. So it already builds on top of the authorization protocol and gives you a way to get profile information, a way to do system discovery, all of this stuff that OAuth 2 doesn't concern itself with. And yeah, all of this has mostly been covered because, like I said, I wasn't planning on talking. The reason that this really matters, in my opinion, especially coming from my world, where I do a lot of my work with the U.S. federal government, is the ability to go all across this spectrum, to be able to go from level of assurance 0. You have no idea who's coming in the front door, but you kind of want to know that they're the same person that was there last time, and maybe give them a display name. And that's really all that you care about, all the way up to really, really high level of assurance. LOA3, you're really, really sure that the person you're talking to is who they say they are, and potentially above. And Connect has the possibility to scale from all of these, and also scale in the more traditional numbers sense, going from a small provider you can just kind of slap something together in an afternoon that is compliant with the standard, use off-the-shelf, open source, often libraries, to get this stuff going and have a working system, And it can also be used by giants like Google and Facebook and all of these other companies that have been looking into this. So to give you an idea of where OpenID Connect is different from traditional systems, and I don't have a slide in this section on SAML, so if somebody wants to point where SAML goes in this triangle, please do. The idea is that, and all of these protocols that we're dealing with the web, it's a double redirect-based protocol. So there's a front channel, which goes through the user agent, which means you're sending HTTP 302 redirects, saying go over here and then come back to a URL that I'll tell you about at some other point. And so that's all stuff that goes through the user agent. Now that's really cool because you can actually have the end user interact and authenticate and provide authorization decisions, and you can actually do user interaction here. That's all well and good, but it is leaky as all get out because it's going through a browser. You know, who knows who's grabbing everything through there. You can protect all of your endpoints and do all sorts of stuff, but it's going to leak through the front channel. But you also have the back channel, which is a direct HTTP connection between your service provider and your identity provider, so the RP, your relying party on the side, and the IDP. And that's a lot less leaky, but you don't have the user there. You can't really do any type of interaction, and that relies a lot on stuff being set up ahead of time. Now, traditional enterprise systems really just kind of ignore the fact that we have users and rely on the back channel to do all sorts of magical things in order to make the user experience actually work. You might toss a cookie out to the end user, and hopefully they'll be happy with their cookie and they'll leave you alone. But this doesn't work with distributed systems. It's really not a good model for most federation, where you don't necessarily know the players or even what they're going to be doing ahead of time. So the way that OpenID 2, which is really with OpenID Connect coming up, OpenID 2 I would consider a legacy protocol. It's still out there. It's still rocking hundreds of thousands of sites, I would say, give or take. And it's still there and available, but it's really kind of getting long in the tooth. And there's a lot of problems with it when you're going to higher assurance stuff, which is one of the reasons we are developing OpenID Connect. Regardless, the way that OpenID 2 worked is that it used the front channel for dang near everything. So all of your claims, all of your crypto, all of your extensions, attributes, anything that you could think of just got crammed onto the front channel. And I have actually overwhelmed the Apache web server with the length of URLs that were generated by OpenID 2.0 transactions. Now this is not overwhelming like a little mobile phone browser or something. This is honest to goodness out of the box Apache, for crying out loud. Threw up its hands and said, that is way too big of a URL for me. That's what happens when you use your front channel as your only extension point. And in the back channel, just to kind of close up the triangle, because you have to close all points of this triangle for this type of transaction to work, you do a little bit of cryptographic verification, a little bit of discovery, a couple of other things in the back channel, but really not all that much. The front channel is where everything's going. Now, OAuth came along and said, well, we actually care about connecting that back channel. It's all about, and this is the pattern that was developed for OAuth 1. We care about connecting that back channel in a secure manner. So we're going to use the front channel to just pass around a temporary credential through the browser, do our user authorization and authentication through that, and then we're going to do all of our tokens, all of our protected access, everything that you can think of through the back channel. So you use the front channel to kind of bootstrap the process, use the back channel to actually do your real work. Now, with OpenID 2, we saw that you use the back channel to kind of prop things up and kind of make it work, but the front channel is where you did your real work. So OpenID Connect comes along, and this should now actually look familiar, because you use the front channel to do a temporary credential and user authorization, and the back channel is where you do your tokens, your identity, your API claims, and all of that other kind of stuff. So it is building directly on top of the OAuth model. Now the reason that this decision was made is that the OAuth model really got a lot of things right. And it turned, it kind of turned the whole OpenID model up on its head. Now, when Connect came along, there was a decision to say, we're going to build directly on top of OAuth, but we need to build in all of the functionality that people are used to for OpenID Connect. So all of this discovery, dynamic registration, and a bunch of other stuff came along. And it's, again, built on top of the OAuth patterns. Now, OAuth has some endpoints that it defines. The authorization endpoint, which is your front channel facing endpoint. So that's where you actually send your users. Then there's the token endpoint, which is your back channel endpoint. So as you can see, this whole notion of a front channel versus back channel is very, very fundamental to how OAuth and all of these kinds of protocols work. Now, Connect came along and added a whole bunch of other stuff, the user info endpoint, the session management. Oh, good, you took check ID off the slide. Thank you. I wrote these slides back when we actually had another endpoint that was since asked. Yeah, I see that. In this case, I actually approve. So anyway, to give you an idea of what all of these look like, the user info endpoint is an OAuth 2 protected resource. Now, when Facebook Connect came along, we as a community saw that what developers really wanted to be able to do is they wanted to get an API access token to go do all the crazy Facebooky kind of stuff. But one of the APIs that they really wanted was just who is the user that this token is good for? What's their name? What's their email address? You know, what do I call them? What do I print on the screen when I say, hello, fill in something over here? Facebook's social graph API defined what is basically the basis for the user info endpoint. It's an OAuth 2 protected resource. You get back a JSON object that describes what the user is. Now, Connect is doing some really cool stuff to actually make this extensible and make it useful in some really interesting ways that that really haven't been done this well before. Distributed claims is one of the most interesting bits in that you can actually say to get a particular claim. So say so one of the projects I'm working on right now, AppMiter, is dealing with healthcare-related systems. So say you've got a doctor logging into your system and you want to know whether or not they really are an oncologist. Well, their identity provider is probably not going to be the gold source for that piece of information. We don't necessarily want to trust them. You want to trust the National College of Oncology, which I think that's the name of it, to actually make assertions like that. Why? Because that's their job, to keep track of who is and who isn't an oncologist. So what you can do at the identity provider, instead of saying, yes, this person is an oncologist and really trust me because, you know, I'm authoritative for their name and other stuff, you can say, to find out whether or not this person is an oncologist, go here, and you can embed a URL. And this should seem very RESTful, very REST architecture friendly to you, because this is how RESTful systems work with, you provide a link to more information that the client can then go infect it if it needs it. And this is a very, very powerful way to build up the graph. You can also throw in your own access token to use when fetching it or make the client do it on its own, all that other kind of stuff. Now, I'm going to skip over all of Nat's slides. Sorry, Nat. Because I wanted to hit on 2 bits. The smart clients. So what I think we're going to be talking about mostly are kind of the more simplified clients that are using sort of the core OAuth 2 flows, particularly the access code flow, which is our basic client flow. But you can also do all sorts of crazy stuff with your client using this really cool extension called the request object that Nat and John have come up with. And you can actually have a signed request, something that's signed by a client going to the server to kick off this whole process. So it doesn't, so you know, you can get much higher levels of assurance between client and server when you're doing this. You can also have the client process all of the signed tokens and check the signatures and do encryption and all kinds of stuff inside the client if you want to. But all of this is optional. If all you need to know is somebody is logged in by an identity provider that I trust, you don't have to concern yourself with any of this. Unlike with systems like SAML, where your client at least has to know how to do all of this in order to even ask that question. So this is how OpenID Connect really manages to spread across that spectrum. Now I do have the history bit. I'm at 13 minutes. Yes? Okay. Okay, y'all can just leave. I don't even supposed to be talking today. So, sure. This won't take that long. So, contrary to popular belief and what John Broadley might tell you, OpenID Connect did not descend from the heavens fully formed and come to us. So there's a lot that came before it that fed into the design of OpenID Connect. And if a lot of OpenID Connect sounds familiar to you from other systems, there's really good reason for that. Back in the day, we had OpenID 1.0, which was really about letting bloggers log on to other bloggers' logs and blog at them. And that's really all it was meant to do. And the community kind of picked that up and said, wow, this is actually a really good identity protocol. We can do this. And so with version 2.0, it became a framework, which is what happens when anything goes to version 2.0. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened from SAML 1.0 to SAML 2.0, OAuth 1.0 to OAuth 2.0. You hit 2.0, you hit framework. And with OpenID 2.0, we had all sorts of different kinds of extensions. Not only was it cleaned up and made it a little bit more sensible how the protocol actually worked, we got all kinds of extensions for doing attribute exchange, security, discovery. All of this stuff is kind of parceled out into its own little bitty pieces. And we started to have an ecosystem built on top of this framework that people were using, OpenID 2, to do all of this stuff. Now, while OpenID was solving the distributed authentication problem, OAuth came along and said, that's not the problem we have. We have a distributed authorization problem, and we really care about connecting that back channel. And so they did that, and it's not directly compatible with OpenID, but that, of course, didn't stop Google from trying, and they built this very strange chimera called the OAuth OpenID hybrid. And they really were kind of strange bedfellows. It really was odd how that kind of fit together. Meanwhile, over in the enterprise world, you had the WS Star and SAML and IDWSF stuff that was kind of ignoring what the rest of the internet was doing. And sorry, I have kind of strong opinions on the WS Star. So anyway, they were off in their own little world and weren't really connected into what the rest of the community was doing. But what they were doing was solving the sort of, the known federation boundary use case and solving it pretty well. It's complicated. There's a lot that you have to learn to even get started in this world. But once you get it all up, and if you can pay somebody to build all the processors for you, it'll work. Now, it's telling me to check out the word of the day. Sorry, it seems interesting. Where was I? Right. So what the community did, because the WS Star folks weren't really talking to us that much, is they actually stole some of the best ideas from WS Star and created this thing that was called WRAP. I forget what it stands for. But that it was eventually rebranded OAuth WRAP, much to the consternation of the OAuth community, because it took the pattern of the OAuth kind of and none of the mechanisms of OAuth. Meanwhile, Facebook is just off in their own little corner being Facebook and saying, well, screw all y'all because we're Facebook, and we can get away with developing our own protocol. They did, and it kind of stole everybody's lunch, which made everybody step back for a bit and say, hang on a sec, Facebook must really be doing something right on the technology level to get this much developer adoption. And so we had to take a look at what they were doing. And the OAuth world, WRAP, and Facebook Connect all came together to build OAuth 2. Okay, I'm almost done. Oh, look at that. All right. I'm just going to keep talking.
Yeah.
So,
ignore the man behind the curtain.
Right. So, all of this world came together to build OAuth 2, which, as John said, is finally almost an RFC. It's the last 2 to 3 years of my life I've been working on this. So very happy to see that getting wrapped up. Now, meanwhile, the discovery world kind of moved along, and Sam birthed the Jot and Jose world, which really, if you look at Jose, all of those specifications, that's the SAML document sort of signing and structure assertion stuff, but based on JSON. And all of this, and I really do mean all of this, is what came together to build OpenID Connect. And so if you're looking at OpenID Connect's request objects and the identity token and all of that other stuff, and you're like, oh, wow, that really looks like a SAML assertion, but it's like JSON flavored. Well, yeah, it is. And if you're looking at it and saying, like, oh, all this profile information, that really feels like I'm doing a Facebook open social graph call. Well, yeah, it's because that's what it's made to look like. And if you're building the simple client and you're like, wow, this really feels like I'm just doing OAuth 2 with a special scope and I get back this weirdly shaped token, well, that's because you are. And this is all on purpose. OpenID Connect is the best from all of these different worlds. And we really set out to kind of take the best lessons learned that we could from years of experience of deploying all of these other technologies and trying to cram it into all sorts of different use cases and making that work with OpenID Connect. And I'm going to say that OpenID Connect is not the end game. I think it's going to be around for a while, and I think it does a lot of things right, but it's going to influence something else that's going to be even better. If I knew what it was, I would go invent it, but I don't yet, so we'll have to wait and see. But the important thing is that we as the community know that this isn't the end game either. It's the best we can do with the technologies we have based on the history that we know. And I want to close up here with one of my favorite quotes from Douglas Crockford, the guy who invented JSON. And that's the good thing about reinventing the wheel is that eventually you can get around one. Now, a lot of people have said that with OAuth, with Jot, and with all of these other things, that, yeah, we're reinventing the wheels. I think I've made a pretty good case that, well, we are. But that's because we want better wheels. And we know what wheels have come before. And I would challenge all of you to think about the steel-belted, air-filled, tubeless radial tires that are on your car. It's a far cry from the roundish rock on the end of a stick that we first had. And if we as a species didn't reinvent wheels, we'd still all be driving on those roundish rocks. And I don't think that would do very well for ride comfort or performance. And so this is where I think I'm going to get shuffled off the stage. Thank you for putting up with my rambling. I'm going to.
Well done. Any questions for this?
I'm going to throw out my email on here too. So
any questions?
Yeah, and I'll happily take any questions.
Good. So as I mentioned before, what we wanted to do in this first session was to give you some context for OpenID Connect. You hear it from a variety of sources. What we're going to do now is take a 20-minute bio coffee break, and then we'll reassemble and do a deep dive into some of the interop demos and have a chance to look at different